Today is the 17th of July 2025. But if we could somehow peel back the immense layers of time journeying 300 million years into the past, we would find ourselves on a planet that is at once both alien and foundational to our own. This was the Carboniferous period, a chapter in Earth's grand story long before the first dinosaurs left their footprints. It was a world of steam and swamp, a greenhouse planet where great forests of bizarre, towering plants stretched across the continents. There were no polar ice caps to speak of. The globe was wrapped in a blanket of warmth and humidity, causing sea levels to be significantly higher than they are in our modern age. It was a time of profound and monumental life, but not as we know it today. Imagine standing on the shore of a vast, shallow sea. The air, thick and heavy, feels almost like a tangible substance, rich with unfamiliar scents of damp earth and decaying vegetation. The sounds are not of birdsong or the rustle of mammals in the undergrowth, for neither yet existed. Instead, the air vibrates with a constant low hum, the sound of countless millions of insects, some of monstrous proportions. The splash in the nearby water is not a fish as we might recognize it, but perhaps a giant amphibian, a creature still tethered to the aquatic realm of its ancestors. This was a planet on the cusp of great change, a crucible of evolution where new forms of life were experimenting, adapting and competing for dominance. The climate of the Carboniferous was remarkably different from the one we experience. For much of this period, the Earth lacked the dramatic temperature gradients between the equator and the poles that drive our own weather systems. Instead, a more uniform tropical to subtropical climate extended far across the globe. This relentless warmth and moisture, fueled by higher concentrations of greenhouse gases, created the perfect conditions for plant life to flourish on an unprecedented scale. The world was overwhelmingly green, a single, sprawling ecosystem of wetlands and rainforests that would have a profound and lasting impact on the very geology of our planet, laying down the foundations for the energy sources that would one day fuel our own civilization. This ancient world, therefore, presents a fascinating paradox. It is utterly strange, populated by creatures and plants that would seem to be from another world entirely. Yet it is also intimately connected to our present. The immense biological productivity of these primeval forests captured unfathomable amounts of carbon from the atmosphere, sequestering it in the ground. This very process, over millions of years of heat and pressure, would create the vast seams of coal that gave the period its name, the Carbon-bearing Age. To understand the Carboniferous is to understand the deep origins of our climate, our continents, and the very air we breathe today. It is a journey to the roots of the modern world. The Carboniferous period, spanning from about 359 to 299 million years ago, is divided into two distinct epochs, the Mississippian and the Pennsylvanian. Each is marked by unique geological and biological developments, with the Mississippian dominated by vast shallow seas and the Pennsylvanian by the rise of extensive coal-forming swamps. During this era, plant life reached new heights, literally. Some lycophyte trees, like lepidodendron, soared over 30 meters tall, their bark forming intricate patterns that are still visible in fossils today. The dense canopies of these ancient forests created a unique microclimate below, where little sunlight reached the forest floor, fostering the evolution of shade-adapted plants and a complex web of decomposers. The high oxygen levels of the Carboniferous atmosphere, up to 35% compared to today's 21%, enabled insects and arthropods to grow to enormous sizes. The dragonfly-like Meganeura, with a wingspan of over 70 centimeters, ruled the air. On land, vertebrates were undergoing a revolution. Early tetrapods, the ancestors of all amphibians, reptiles, birds and mammals, were making their first tentative steps onto solid ground, forever changing the course of evolution. Meanwhile, the continents themselves were on the move. The Carboniferous saw the gradual assembly of the supercontinent Pangaea, a process that would reshape global climate, ocean currents, and the distribution of life for millions of years to come. The explosion of plant life during this period dramatically altered Earth's atmosphere. Through photosynthesis, these vast forests drew down carbon dioxide, contributing to a long-term cooling trend that would eventually lead to the ice ages of the Permian. Today, scientists study the Carboniferous not only to understand the origins of coal and fossil fuels, but also to gain insight into how life and climate interact on a planetary scale, a lesson that resonates powerfully in our own era of rapid environmental change. The legacy of the Carboniferous is all around us, from the coal that powered the Industrial Revolution to the oxygen we breathe and the landscapes we inhabit. Its story is not just ancient history, it is the foundation of our modern world, and a reminder of the deep connections between life, climate, and the planet itself. During the Carboniferous, the map of the world was unrecognizably simple and yet profoundly complex in its implications. Recent geological research has revealed just how dynamic this era truly was, with continents in constant, albeit slow, motion. Nearly all of the planet's landmass had drifted together, colliding in a slow-motion tectonic ballet to form one enormous supercontinent. This process, known as continental accretion, was driven by the relentless movement of Earth's lithospheric plates. Geologists have given this colossal landmass a fitting name, Pangaea, meaning all Earth. The concept of Pangaea was first proposed in the early 20th century, but only in recent decades have scientists been able to reconstruct its true scale and configuration using advanced geophysical techniques. This was a continent of unimaginable scale, stretching nearly from the South Pole to the North Pole, a single, contiguous expanse of rock and soil surrounded by a global ocean known as Panthalassa. The evidence for this comes from matching geological formations and fossil records found on continents now separated by vast oceans. The familiar shapes of our modern continents were hidden, locked together like pieces of a giant jigsaw puzzle, their future separation still many millions of years away. Fossil discoveries, such as identical plant species in both Europe and North America, provide compelling evidence for this ancient unity. The sheer size of Pangaea had a dramatic and defining effect on the global climate. New studies of ancient sediments reveal that the supercontinent's vastness created extreme seasonal contrasts and influenced atmospheric circulation on a planetary scale. While the coastal regions, bathed in the warm waters of the Panthallassic Ocean, were incredibly humid and subject to monsoonal rains, these areas supported lush vegetation and diverse ecosystems. The interior of the supercontinent was a different story. Far from the moderating influence of the sea, these inland areas would have experienced extreme temperature fluctuations and prolonged periods of dryness. This pattern is mirrored in today's largest continents, but was even more pronounced in Pangaea. This created a world of stark contrasts. On one hand, the lush, year-round swamps that dominated the equatorial belt, which would eventually become the world's richest coal deposits, and on the other, vast, arid landscapes deep within the continent's heart, where life struggled to gain a foothold. The formation of this single landmass fundamentally altered ocean currents and atmospheric circulation, creating climatic patterns unlike any that exist today. Recent computer models have helped scientists understand how these changes may have driven evolutionary pressures. The creation of Pangaea was not a gentle process. It was the result of immense continental plates grinding against one another, generating powerful earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. The land masses of Laurasia, comprising what would become North America, Europe and Asia, crashed into the southern supercontinent of Gondwana, which included future South America, Africa, Antarctica, Australia and India. The collision zones, known as suture belts, are still visible in the rocks today. This colossal collision buckled the Earth's crust, thrusting up immense mountain ranges where the plates met. Some of these ancient mountains, like the Appalachians and Urals, still stand as silent witnesses to these titanic forces. These tectonic forces were the architects of the planet's surface, and their activity was constant, shaping the landscape with earthquakes and volcanic eruptions that would have dwarfed many modern equivalents. Recent discoveries of volcanic ash layers in Carboniferous rocks provide new insights into the frequency and scale of these events. The world was geologically alive, constantly reshaping itself in a process of continental assembly. This dynamic environment set the stage for evolutionary innovation and adaptation. This unique geography set the stage for the life that would evolve. The interconnected landmass provided new migration routes, while isolated regions fostered unique evolutionary experiments. The vast interconnectedness of the land allowed plants and animals to spread across enormous distances, but it also created barriers. New fossil finds continue to reveal surprising links between distant regions, as well as evidence of isolated evolutionary lineages. The arid interior and the new mountain ranges could isolate populations, driving them down different evolutionary paths. Modern genetic research is now uncovering the legacy of these ancient separations in today's biodiversity. The concentration of so much land in one hemisphere also had profound effects on sea levels and glaciation. The Carboniferous saw some of the most extensive ice ages in Earth's history, as revealed by glacial deposits found on now tropical continents. Indeed, towards the end of the Carboniferous, as Panjia drifted and settled, parts of the southern continent moved over the South Pole, allowing massive ice sheets to form. These glaciations left their mark in the form of striated rocks and dropstones, which geologists used to reconstruct ancient climates. This locked up vast quantities of water, causing sea levels to fall and dramatically altering the world's coastlines and the swampy ecosystems that depended on them. The resulting environmental changes set the stage for the next great chapter in Earth's evolutionary story, as new habitats emerged and others vanished forever. The atmosphere of the Carboniferous period was perhaps its most alien feature. While life-giving, it was supercharged. The primary engine for this strange air was the immense and unprecedented explosion of plant life across Pangaea. The vast swampy forests were engaged in photosynthesis on a global scale, drawing down enormous quantities of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and releasing, as a byproduct, colossal amounts of oxygen. This process was so efficient and widespread that it pushed atmospheric oxygen levels to a staggering peak of nearly 35%, a concentration almost half as high again as the 21% we are accustomed to today. This oxygen-rich air had profound and sometimes terrifying consequences for the planet. Breathing this dense, oxygen-heavy air would have been a strange experience, but its most dramatic effect was on fire. With so much oxygen to fuel combustion, any spark from a lightning strike or volcanic activity could ignite catastrophic wildfires. These were not like the fires of our time. They would have burned with an incredible, almost explosive intensity, reaching far higher temperatures and spreading with terrifying speed through the giant forests. Evidence of these ancient infernos is preserved in the geological record in the form of charcoal layers found within coal seams. Fire, therefore, was a powerful and ever-present force of nature, shaping the evolution of plants and clearing vast tracts of landscape in fiery conflagrations. This hyper-oxygenated world also had a direct and startling impact on the evolution of animal life, particularly the arthropods, the group that includes insects, spiders and millipedes. In our modern atmosphere, the size of an insect is limited by its relatively inefficient respiratory system, which relies on a network of small tubes called tracheae to deliver oxygen directly to its tissues. In the dense air of the Carboniferous, however, this system was supercharged. The high partial pressure of oxygen allowed it to diffuse much more deeply into an organism's body, removing a key constraint on size. This evolutionary opportunity was seized upon, leading to a brief but spectacular age of giant invertebrates. The implications of this atmosphere were far-reaching. The high oxygen levels, combined with the drawdown of atmospheric carbon dioxide into coal beds, had a complex effect on the global climate. While CO2 levels were still higher than in our pre-industrial world, their reduction by plant life may have contributed to a cooling trend late in the period, which led to the glaciation in the southern hemisphere. The very air itself became a catalyst for change, enabling the evolution of giants, fueling apocalyptic fires and subtly altering the planet's thermostat. It was a delicate balance, and as the forests that maintained it began to change, so too would the atmosphere, with dramatic consequences for the creatures that had adapted to its unique properties. From a scientific perspective, the Carboniferous atmosphere was not only rich in oxygen, but also characterized by a relatively low concentration of nitrogen compared to today, subtly altering the partial pressures of all gases and influencing physiological processes in both plants and animals. The efficiency of photosynthesis in these ancient plants was enhanced by the high humidity and warm temperatures, but also by the evolution of specialized leaf structures, such as more abundant stomata, that allowed for rapid gas exchange, further accelerating the drawdown of CO2. Fossil evidence, including spores and pollen grains, reveals that plant diversity and density reached unprecedented levels, creating a feedback loop that amplified atmospheric changes and drove evolutionary innovation. The atmospheric conditions also played a crucial role in the transition of vertebrate life from water to land. Elevated oxygen levels made it easier for early amphibians and tetrapods to extract oxygen through primitive lungs and skin, supporting their expansion into terrestrial environments. However, such high oxygen concentrations were a double-edged sword. Modern research suggests that prolonged exposure to hyperoxic conditions can lead to increased oxidative stress, potentially shortening lifespans and influencing the evolution of antioxidant defenses in ancient organisms. The altered atmospheric composition also affected global wind patterns and precipitation, with some models indicating more vigorous atmospheric circulation and increased rainfall, which would have sustained the vast swamp forests, but also contributed to periodic flooding and habitat turnover. The burial of immense quantities of plant material not only formed the coal beds we mine today, but also locked away vast amounts of carbon, fundamentally altering the planet's long-term carbon cycle and setting the stage for future climate shifts. Ongoing research by paleoclimatologists and geochemists continues to refine our understanding of these atmospheric dynamics, using isotopic signatures and fossilized plant remains to reconstruct the intricate interplay between life and air during this pivotal era. The Carboniferous stands as a testament to the profound influence of the biosphere on planetary conditions, demonstrating how life itself can reshape the very air we breathe, with consequences that echo through deep time. The Carboniferous period marked a turning point in Earth's history, as the planet's surface became dominated by vast, lush forests unlike anything seen before or since. But these were not forests of oak, pine or maple. Instead, they were home to a remarkable diversity of now extinct plant lineages. These forests were profoundly strange and majestic ecosystems composed of plant groups that are now either extinct or exist only as small, humble remnants. Recent fossil discoveries have revealed even more about their complexity and structure. The canopy was dominated by giant lycopods or scale trees such as the magnificent lepidodendron, which could reach up to 40 meters in height. These plants reproduced using spores, not seeds, and their reproductive structures have been found beautifully preserved in coal deposits. These were not true trees, but enormous club mosses, including both lepidodendron and its close relative sigillaria, which could soar to heights of over 30 meters or 100 feet. Their trunks were straight and unbranched for most of their height, only forking near the top, and were covered in a distinctive diamond-shaped or vertical pattern of leaf scars, giving them the appearance of a reptile's skin. These giants grew incredibly fast, lived for a relatively short time, sometimes less than a few decades, and then crashed to the forest floor, contributing to the thick layers of organic debris. Beneath the towering lycopods grew other giants, their roots called stigmaria, spreading wide and shallow to anchor them in the waterlogged ground. Dense thickets of calamites, a type of colossal horsetail, crowded the wetlands. These plants, with their hollow, jointed stems, formed a crucial part of the swamp ecosystem. While their modern relatives are small, reed-like plants, calamites could grow as tall as a small building, forming dense, bamboo-like groves that would have been almost impenetrable. Their rapid growth and ability to colonize disturbed ground made them ecological pioneers. Their jointed, ribbed stems littered the forest floor after they died, creating a tangled mat that slowed decomposition and provided habitat for early terrestrial animals. The mid-layers and understory were a lush green tangle of ferns and so-called seed ferns, such as medulosa. Despite their name, seed ferns were not true ferns, but an early group of seed-bearing plants, some of which grew as small trees. This multi-layered, dense canopy would have cast the forest floor into a perpetual humid twilight, a world of deep greens and damp, decaying matter. The humidity and shade created unique microhabitats for early arthropods and amphibians. These forests thrived in vast, low-lying coastal swamps that fringed the equatorial regions of Pangaea, stretching for thousands of kilometers and forming one of the largest wetland systems in Earth's history. The environment was perpetually wet, and the ground was waterlogged, with standing water often covering the roots and lower trunks of the plants. This had a crucial consequence for the carbon cycle. The tough, lignin-rich cell walls of these plants resisted decay, especially in the low oxygen conditions of the swamps. In a normal forest, fungi and bacteria would quickly break down dead plant matter, recycling its nutrients and releasing its carbon back into the atmosphere. But during the Carboniferous, the evolution of lignin-degrading fungi had not yet occurred. In the oxygen-poor, acidic water of the Carboniferous swamps, this process of decomposition was severely inhibited, allowing vast amounts of plant material to accumulate. When the giant lycopods and horsetails died and fell into the mire, they did not fully rot. Instead, their remains built up in thick waterlogged layers. Over time, these remains slowly accumulated, layer upon layer, forming immense thick mats of partially decomposed plant material known as peat. Some peat beds from this era are over 10 meters thick. Over millions of years, as seas rose and fell, these vast peat beds were buried by layers of sand and mud, preserving them from further decay. Trapped deep underground, the immense pressure from the overlying sediments and the heat from the Earth's interior worked a slow and powerful transformation, compressing and altering the organic material. The water was squeezed out, and the organic molecules were rearranged, becoming ever more concentrated in carbon. a process that would eventually yield coal. This geological cooking process turned the peat into lignite, then into bituminous coal, and finally, in some cases, into hard, glossy anthracite. Fossilized plant structures can still be seen in some coal seams today. The great forests of the Carboniferous, through their life and death, became the architects of the immense coal seams that would one day power the Industrial Revolution and shape the modern world. Their ecological impact was profound, drawing down atmospheric carbon dioxide and helping to cool the planet, while providing the foundation for the evolution of complex terrestrial ecosystems. New research continues to reveal the extraordinary diversity and significance of these ancient forests, reminding us of their enduring legacy in Earth's history. The Carboniferous period, spanning roughly 359 to 299 million years ago, was a time of extraordinary evolutionary innovation. The oxygen-rich atmosphere and sprawling swamp forests created a paradise for invertebrates, allowing them to reach sizes that, well, seem nightmarish to us today. These lush environments were structured in complex vertical layers, from the towering lycopod trees to the dense undergrowth of ferns and horsetails, providing a multitude of ecological niches. The undisputed king of the skies was Meganeura, a griffinfly that was essentially a gigantic version of a dragonfly. Its fossilized wings reveal intricate venation, hinting at its powerful flight capabilities. With a wingspan that could exceed 75 centimeters, over 2.5 feet, it was a formidable aerial predator, its huge compound eyes scanning for prey as it patrolled the humid air above the swamps. Meganeura likely hunted other insects on the wing, using its speed and agility to snatch them mid-flight. On the forest floor, another giant held sway, Arthropleura. This colossal millipede-like arthropod was the largest known land invertebrate of all time, growing to be over 2.5 meters or 8 feet long. Arthropleura's segmented body was protected by a tough exoskeleton, which it periodically shed as it grew. Its mouthparts were adapted for processing tough plant material, and it likely played a crucial role in breaking down decaying vegetation, recycling nutrients back into the ecosystem. It navigated the undergrowth, feeding on the rich carpet of decaying plant matter. Some evidence suggests Arthropleura may have occasionally moved in groups, further accelerating the decomposition process in these ancient forests. These were not the only giants. The Carboniferous forests teemed with a diversity of arthropods, including the Paleodictyoptera, sometimes called the giant-beaked insects, which possessed long tubular mouthparts for piercing and sucking plant fluids. The damp leaf litter and rotting logs were home to scorpions the size of a human forearm, such as Pulmonoscorpius, which may have preyed on smaller arthropods and even early amphibians. Cockroaches like Archimelacris would have absolutely dwarfed any found in a modern kitchen, scurrying through the undergrowth and playing a vital role as decomposers. The abundance of both plant food and smaller insects provided a rich banquet that fueled this explosion of gigantism. Detritivores, such as ancient silverfish, helped break down organic matter, supporting the entire food web. These creatures thrived in a world without vertebrate competition in the air or in many of the small terrestrial niches. Even the tiniest arthropods, like springtails, played essential roles in soil formation and nutrient cycling. The air buzzed and the ground crawled, with a menagerie of arthropods that had taken full advantage of the unique environmental conditions. Predatory centipedes stalked the shadows, while herbivorous insects grazed on the lush foliage. For a time, it was truly their planet, a world where insects and their relatives ruled the land. Fossilized trackways in ancient mud reveal the bustling activity of these invertebrate giants. While invertebrates dominated the small-scale world, the largest land vertebrates were the amphibians. Their permeable skin required constant moisture, restricting them to the dampest environments. Having evolved from lobe-finned fish, these animals were the pioneers of terrestrial life, but they remained inextricably tied to water. Early forms like Ichthyostiga and Acanthostiga still retained many aquatic features, including lateral line systems for detecting vibrations. Their skin was not waterproof and needed to be kept moist, and they had to return to the swamps and pools to lay their shell-less, jelly-like eggs. The aquatic larvae, or tadpoles, would undergo metamorphosis before venturing onto land. The Carboniferous was their golden age. Amphibians flourished in the wetlands, feeding on abundant insects and other small prey. They diversified into a bewildering array of forms, from small salamander-like creatures scurrying in the damp undergrowth to colossal crocodile-like predators. Some, like Diplocaulus, developed unique adaptations such as boomerang-shaped skulls, possibly for defense or hydrodynamics. One of the largest was Eriops, a powerfully built ambush predator that could grow to over 2 meters long, with a wide, flat skull and a mouth full of sharp teeth. Eriops likely waited motionless in the shallows, lunging at unsuspecting prey. These giant amphibians were the apex predators of the swamps, equipped with robust limbs and powerful jaws for subduing fish, insects, and even smaller amphibians. They would lie in wait in the murky water, their eyes just above the surface, waiting for fish, large insects, or other smaller amphibians to come within striking range. Camouflage and stealth were key to their hunting success. With a sudden lunge, they would snap their powerful jaws shut, securing their meal. Most amphibians swallowed their prey whole, relying on their broad mouths and expandable throats. Despite their size and ferocity, their reliance on water was their fundamental limitation. Some species developed behaviours like burrowing into mud to survive dry spells, but few could stray far from the wetlands. They could not venture far from the wetlands, and their entire life cycle was dependent on the continued existence of the swampy environment. Droughts or habitat loss could devastate populations, as eggs and larvae were especially vulnerable to desiccation. This dependence would ultimately prove to be their undoing when the climate began to change, leaving them vulnerable as their world dried up around them. Fossil evidence shows a marked decline in amphibian diversity, as the Carboniferous gave way to drier, more seasonal climates, paving the way for new evolutionary innovations yet to come. Hidden amongst the giant ferns and the colossal roots of the scale trees, a revolutionary new type of animal was taking its first tentative steps. These were the first true reptiles, small lizard-like creatures such as Hylonomus. They were diminutive by the standards of the time, often no more than 20 centimetres long, and would have been easily overlooked in a world of giant insects and monstrous amphibians. They scurried through the leaf litter, likely hunting the abundant insects and other small invertebrates that teemed on the forest floor. Yet despite their humble appearance, these small creatures possessed a biological innovation that would ultimately allow their descendants to conquer the planet and inherit the Earth. This key evolutionary breakthrough was the amniotic egg. Unlike the gelatinous, shell-less eggs of amphibians, which had to be laid in water to prevent them from drying out, the amniotic egg had a protective, semi-permeable shell. Inside, a series of membranes created a self-contained aquatic environment for the developing embryo, its own private pond. This remarkable adaptation severed the final tie to the water for reproduction. For the first time, vertebrates could lay their eggs on dry land, far from the swamps and pools that constrained their amphibian cousins. This opened up the vast, drier interiors of Panjia, a whole new world of opportunity that was previously out of reach. Alongside the amniotic egg, these early reptiles evolved other crucial adaptations for terrestrial life. They developed scaly, waterproof skin that reduced water loss, allowing them to better tolerate drier conditions. Their lungs and circulatory systems were also more efficient than those of most amphibians, providing the stamina needed for a more active life away from the water's edge. Initially, they were a minor component of the Carboniferous ecosystem, living in the shadows of the amphibian giants. They occupied a niche as small, agile insectivores, a role for which they were perfectly suited. But they held within their DNA the blueprint for future dominance. The world of the Carboniferous, therefore, saw a planet divided. The old guard, the amphibians, were masters of the wetlands, powerful and numerous, but ultimately confined by their own biology. The newcomers, the reptiles, were small and seemingly insignificant, but they held the key to unlocking the rest of the continent. For millions of years these two groups coexisted, but the balance of power was destined to shift. As the climate of the Carboniferous began to change and the great swamps started to retreat, the amphibians would face a crisis, while the adaptable, resilient reptiles would find that the world was changing in their favour, heralding the dawn of a new age. Recent fossil discoveries have provided deeper insights into these early reptiles. The well-preserved remains of Hylonomus, found in the Joggins fossil cliffs of Nova Scotia, offer a glimpse into their anatomy and lifestyle. These fossils reveal that Hylonomus had strong, agile limbs and a robust skeletal structure, indicating a life well adapted to navigating the dense undergrowth of Carboniferous forests. Artistic reconstructions based on these fossils show Hylonomus as an active predator darting through the foliage in search of prey, a testament to their evolutionary success. The evolution of reptiles marked a significant turning point in vertebrate history. Their adaptations not only allowed them to survive, but to thrive in a variety of environments, setting the stage for the rise of the dinosaurs and eventually mammals. The Carboniferous period, therefore, stands as a pivotal chapter in the story of life on Earth, where the seeds of future dominance were sown by these pioneering reptiles. The story of the Carboniferous is not just one of life, but also of the immense geological forces that shaped the world in which that life existed. During this era, the planet's crust was in a state of constant transformation, driven by processes that would define the very face of the continents for millions of years to come. The period was defined by the final stages of the assembly of the supercontinent Panjia, a process driven by the inexorable movement of Earth's tectonic plates. These plates, massive slabs of lithosphere, floated atop the semi-fluid asthenosphere, their slow but relentless motion powered by convection currents deep within the mantle. As the continents of Laurasia and Gondwana ground into one another, the crust at their margins buckled, folded and fractured. This deformation was not uniform. Instead, it produced a complex mosaic of thrust faults, fold belts and metamorphic zones, each recording the immense pressures and temperatures generated by continental collision. This colossal, slow-motion collision gave birth to vast mountain ranges. The process, known as orogeny, involved not only the uplift of rock, but also the deep burial and subsequent metamorphism of crustal material, creating rocks such as schist, gneiss and quartzite. In the region that would one day become eastern North America and northwestern Africa, the continental smash-up created the central Pangean Mountains, a range that in its prime would have rivaled the modern Himalayas in scale and grandeur. These mountains were the result of multiple orogenic events, including the Alleghanian, Hercynian and Variscan orogenies, each contributing to the complex structure of the range. The remnants of this mighty mountain chain exist today as the much-eroded Appalachians in North America and the Anti-Atlas Mountains in Morocco. These ancient rocks preserve evidence of deep crustal processes, such as high-pressure metamorphism and the intrusion of granitic magmas that occurred during the Carboniferous. During the Carboniferous, however, they were young, jagged and immense, forming a formidable barrier across the heart of the supercontinent. Their rapid uplift also triggered intense erosion, with rivers carrying vast quantities of sediment away from the peaks. To the east, another collision, that of Siberia and Kazakhstania, with the eastern edge of Laurasia, was simultaneously thrusting up the Ural Mountains. The Urals, like the central Pangean mountains, are a classic example of a suture zone where rocks from entirely different continents were welded together. These great ranges were not just static features on the landscape, they were geologically active and dynamic, constantly being reshaped by the very forces that created them. Landslides, earthquakes and rapid uplift were common as the crust adjusted to the immense stresses of collision. The Earth's surface was in a state of violent and powerful flux. Earthquakes frequently rattled the growing mountains, while volcanic eruptions added new layers of rock to the landscape. This mountain building, or orogeny, was accompanied by widespread volcanic activity. Volcanism was especially intense along subduction zones, where oceanic crust was forced beneath continental plates. As one tectonic plate was forced beneath another in a process called subduction, rock from the crust was melted deep within the earth, generating vast quantities of magma. This process also released water and other volatiles from the subducting slab, lowering the melting point of the overlying mantle and fueling further magmatism. This molten rock rose to the surface, erupting through chains of volcanoes that would have lined the collision zones. These volcanic arcs were not only sources of lava and ash, but also of valuable mineral deposits such as copper, lead and zinc, which formed from hydrothermal fluids circulating through the fractured crust. These volcanoes would have periodically blanketed the surrounding landscape in thick layers of ash and unleashed massive lava flows. The ash altered soil chemistry, influencing the types of plants that could thrive, while lava flows reshaped the terrain and created new habitats. The air would have been filled with volcanic gases, including sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide, which had a significant, albeit complex, impact on the global climate, at times contributing to warming and at others potentially causing short-term cooling. These emissions also played a role in acid rain, which could have affected both terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems. The formation of these mountains had a profound influence on regional climates and ecosystems. Their sheer height altered atmospheric circulation, redirecting wind patterns and influencing the distribution of rainfall. They created immense rain shadows, where one side of the range received enormous amounts of precipitation, while the other side, starved of moisture, became exceedingly arid. This led to the development of distinct ecological zones, from lush forests to barren plains. This further exaggerated the climatic extremes between the wet equatorial belt and the dry interior of Panjia. The mountains acted as climatic barriers, isolating regions and promoting the evolution of unique plant and animal communities. The mountains also dictated the flow of rivers, carving out new drainage basins and directing sediment towards the low-lying swampy coasts. Braided river systems, alluvial fans and vast deltas formed at the mountain fronts, shaping the landscape and providing fertile ground for the growth of Carboniferous forests. The very existence of the coal swamps was in part a consequence of these tectonic processes, as the weight of the newly formed mountains caused the crust to sag, creating the perfect shallow basins for peat to accumulate. Over millions of years, these basins would be repeatedly filled and buried by sediment, preserving the organic material that would eventually become coal. One key geological process was the formation of foreland basins, depressions that develop adjacent to rising mountain belts as the lithosphere flexes under the immense load. These basins acted as sediment traps, collecting eroded material from the mountains and providing stable, waterlogged environments ideal for the preservation of plant matter. As erosion gradually wore down the mountains, the crust responded through isostatic rebound, a process where the removal of mass allows the underlying lithosphere to rise. This ongoing adjustment further influenced river patterns, sedimentation rates, and the long-term evolution of the landscape. The geological legacy of Carboniferous mountain building is still visible today in the form of folded rocks, ancient faults, and fossilized river systems. These features provide a window into the dynamic processes that shaped the ancient Earth, revealing a world in constant motion, sculpted by the relentless forces of plate tectonics and erosion. For millions of years, the great humid coal forests had dominated the planet's equator, a seemingly stable and endless ecosystem. These rainforests, teeming with life, were the engines of atmospheric oxygen and the cradles of evolutionary innovation. But this green kingdom was not destined to last. Beneath the surface, subtle shifts were already setting the stage for a dramatic transformation. Around 305 million years ago, a devastating, slow-motion extinction event began, an event known as the Carboniferous rainforest collapse. This event fundamentally altered the course of life on Earth. Unlike sudden catastrophes, this was a gradual but profound shift driven by a complex interplay of geological and climatic forces. Recent research highlights the role of tectonic activity as the supercontinent Panjia continued to drift and consolidate, altering global weather patterns. As a large portion of southern Gondwana moved directly over the South Pole, the planet's climate system was thrown into turmoil. This allowed vast ice sheets to form and expand, locking up immense volumes of water and causing a dramatic drop in global sea levels. The resulting glaciation not only cooled the planet, but also exposed large areas of land, further disrupting established ecosystems. This sudden glaciation sent shockwaves through the world's climate system. The monsoonal patterns that had reliably watered the equatorial forests began to falter. The planet became progressively cooler and, crucially, much drier. The once steady rainfall patterns gave way to prolonged droughts, and the lush forests began to shrink. The reliable monsoonal rains that had fed the equatorial swamps for millennia began to fail. Palynological studies, analyses of fossil pollen, reveal a sudden shift from wet-loving plants to those adapted for drier conditions. The vast wetland ecosystems, utterly dependent on a constant supply of moisture, began to wither and die. The collapse was not uniform. Some regions experienced repeated cycles of drying and brief recovery, but the overall trend was unmistakable. The giant lycopod trees, with their shallow root systems and thirst for water, were among the first to suffer. Their decline signalled the unravelling of the entire rainforest web. The swamps dried up, and the once lush rainforests fragmented, breaking apart into smaller, isolated pockets of life, separated by increasingly arid landscapes. These refugia became the last strongholds for many species. The world that had been defined by its dampness was now defined by its encroaching dryness. The transition was so stark that it left a clear signature in the rocks beneath our feet. The effects on the planet's atmosphere and its fauna were catastrophic. The loss of vast forests meant a dramatic reduction in photosynthesis and oxygen production. As the great forests vanished, the primary engine of oxygen production was shut down. Recent geochemical analyses confirm a sharp decline in atmospheric oxygen with profound consequences for life. Atmospheric oxygen levels, which had peaked at around 35%, began a steep decline. This drop is now measurable in ancient air bubbles trapped in fossilized tree resin. For the giant arthropods, this was a death sentence. Their massive bodies relied on high oxygen concentrations to fuel their metabolism. Creatures like Meganeura and Arthropleura, whose immense size was only possible due to the oxygen-rich air, could no longer sustain their bodies. Fossil records show a marked decrease in arthropod size following the collapse. They vanished from the fossil record, their brief reign of gigantism brought to an abrupt end. This extinction event reshaped the evolutionary landscape for terrestrial invertebrates. The amphibians also suffered immensely. Their dependence on moist environments made them especially vulnerable to the drying climate. As their swampy habitats disappeared, so did they. Many amphibian lineages were unable to adapt to the new, arid conditions. Their populations crashed, and many species went extinct, unable to cope with the loss of the watery world they depended upon. The fossil record from this period is marked by a sharp decline in amphibian diversity. This dramatic environmental shift is clearly visible in the geological record. Layers of coal abruptly give way to sediments indicative of drier conditions. In rock strata from this time, the thick, dark bands of coal that characterize the heart of the Carboniferous period abruptly thin out or disappear entirely. This transition is now used as a key marker for the end of the coal forests. They are replaced by what geologists call red beds, layers of sandstone and shale stained red by oxidized iron, a clear sign of a much drier, more seasonal climate. These red beds are found on every continent that once formed part of Pangaea. This geological scar marks the tombstone of the great coal forests. The collapse was not just a local event, but a global transformation visible in rocks around the world. Yet, as is so often the case in the story of life, one group's crisis is another's opportunity. The collapse of the rainforest opened new ecological niches. The reptiles, with their waterproof skin and amniotic eggs, were perfectly pre-adapted for this new, drier world. Their evolutionary innovations allowed them to colonize habitats that amphibians could not. As the amphibians faltered, the reptiles began to thrive, diversifying and spreading into the niches left vacant. This pivotal moment set the stage for the rise of the amniotes and ultimately the age of the dinosaurs and mammals. Today, the Carboniferous rainforest collapse stands as a powerful reminder of how interconnected Earth's systems are and how changes in climate, geology and biology can reshape the world in ways both devastating and transformative. The Carboniferous rainforest collapse was not merely an extinction event, it was a profound turning point that ushered in a new geological period, the Permian. Recent research has revealed that this transition was marked by a series of complex, interwoven environmental and biological changes, rather than a single catastrophic event. The world that emerged from the collapse was fundamentally different from the one that had preceded it. Fossil evidence from across the globe shows a dramatic reduction in plant diversity, with many wetland species vanishing almost simultaneously. The warm, humid greenhouse of the Carboniferous gave way to a harsher, more seasonal planet. Geochemical analyses indicate a significant drop in atmospheric oxygen, which may have contributed to the decline of giant arthropods and amphibians. The vast, unified supercontinent of Pangaea created extreme continental climates, with bitterly cold winters and scorching hot summers in its interior. The assembly of Pangaea also altered ocean currents and atmospheric circulation, further intensifying climatic extremes. The global climate was drier, and the endless swamps were replaced by more varied landscapes, including deserts, open woodlands and seasonal floodplains. This environmental mosaic set the stage for evolutionary innovation. The age of the swamp monsters was over. Amphibians, once dominant, were now restricted to shrinking aquatic habitats. unable to compete in the new arid world. Plant life underwent a radical transformation to cope with these new conditions. Recent paleobotanical studies have identified the emergence of drought-resistant features, such as thicker cuticles and reduced leaf size. The moisture-loving lycopods and giant horsetails that had dominated the Carboniferous were relegated to minor roles, surviving only in dwindling refuges. Their decline is now linked to both climate change and the fragmentation of their habitats. In their place rose a new kind of flora, the gymnosperms. These plants, including the ancestors of modern conifers, cycads and ginkgos, were better equipped to survive in the drier, more variable Permian climate. These were seed-producing plants such as the early conifers, which were far better adapted to drier, more seasonal environments. Their seeds could remain dormant during unfavourable conditions, a crucial advantage in the unpredictable Permian world. Their seeds provided more protection and nourishment for the embryo than the simple spores of the earlier plants, allowing them to colonize the arid interiors of the continent. Deep root systems also enabled them to access water far below the surface. The endless, monotonous green of the Carboniferous was replaced by a more varied and resilient vegetation. This diversification of plant life would have far-reaching effects on soil formation and nutrient cycling. This new world was the perfect stage for the reptiles. The fossil record shows a rapid increase in both the diversity and abundance of reptilian species during this time. Freed from their dependence on water for reproduction, they flourished in the drier Permian climate. The evolution of the amniotic egg was a key innovation, allowing reptiles to lay eggs on land and colonize new habitats. They exploded in diversity, evolving into a wide array of forms to fill the ecological void left by the decline of the giant amphibians. New discoveries continue to reveal unexpected lineages and adaptations among early reptiles. Herbivorous reptiles appeared for the first time, as did large, formidable predators. This diversification set the stage for complex food webs and new ecological interactions. This was the beginning of the true age of reptiles. Their evolutionary success would shape terrestrial ecosystems for millions of years. Among them were the synapsids, a group that included the sail-backed Dimetrodon, and which would, many millions of years later, give rise to the first mammals. Recent fossil finds have shed light on the gradual acquisition of mammalian traits in these ancient creatures. The Permian saw reptiles firmly establish their dominance on land, a reign that would last for over 200 million years. Their fossils are now found on every continent, a testament to their adaptability and success. The transition from the Carboniferous to the Permian serves as a powerful reminder of the dynamic nature of our planet. Modern climate models, informed by ancient data, help us understand the profound consequences of rapid environmental change. It shows how interconnected climate, geology and life truly are, and how a change in one can lead to a cascade of consequences throughout the entire system. The Carboniferous-Permian transition is now recognized as a key example of Earth system science in action. The world of the Permian, born from the ashes of the Carboniferous rainforests, would see the reptiles rise to become the undisputed masters of the globe. This period also witnessed the first major radiation of insects and the continued evolution of terrestrial ecosystems. Yet this new era would itself come to a shattering conclusion. Geological evidence points to massive volcanic eruptions, climate instability and ocean anoxia as key drivers of the end Permian mass extinction. It would end with the most devastating mass extinction event in Earth's history, the Great Dying, a catastrophe that would wipe out over 90% of all life and set the stage for the next chapter in life's story, the age of the dinosaurs. The legacy of the Carboniferous Permian transition continues to inform our understanding of resilience, adaptation, and the fragility of life on Earth. While the Carboniferous period is often celebrated for its vast forests and colossal land-dwelling creatures, much of its story unfolded beneath the waves. The ancient seas of this era teemed with life, forming complex ecosystems that rivaled the drama of the swampy landscapes above. Sprawling shallow seas covered large portions of the continents, creating extensive reef systems built not by corals, but by sponges, algae and bryozoans. These reef communities provided shelter and hunting grounds for a stunning variety of marine species. Crinoids, sometimes called sea lilies, blanketed the sea floor in dense meadows, their feathery arms filtering nutrients from the water. Among these underwater forests swam armoured fish known as placoderms, lingering remnants from earlier periods, while new groups of sharks and ray-finned fishes diversified into countless forms. Early cartilaginous fish, some resembling modern-day rays, prowled the seabeds, while others, like the fearsome helicoprion with its spiral-toothed jaw, patrolled deeper waters. The invertebrate world flourished as well. Ammonoids, relatives of today's squid and octopus, drifted through the open ocean in intricately coiled shells. Their sudden population booms and crashes, leaving a fossil record that helps scientists date ancient rocks. Giant sea scorpions, or euripterids, stalked both coastal waters and freshwater lagoons, some reaching lengths of over 2 meters. Beneath the waves, trilobites, once the dominant marine arthropods, were now in decline, but they still played vital roles as scavengers and prey. Brachiopods, with their distinctive shells, carpeted the seabed alongside bivalves and gastropods, forming the backbone of many food chains. These marine communities were tightly linked to the world's changing climate and geology. The vast limestone deposits from this time, now found on every continent, are a testament to the prolific sea life that once thrived here. The interplay between rising and falling sea levels, driven by glaciation and tectonic shifts, constantly reshape marine habitats, spurring bursts of evolution and extinction. The Carboniferous oceans were not just a backdrop, they were a crucible of innovation. Many modern fish lineages trace their roots to this time, and the marine ecosystems of the era set the stage for future evolutionary radiations. As the land above transformed, so too did the seas, echoing the story of resilience and adaptation that defines the Carboniferous period. In the great tapestry of Earth's history, the forgotten seas of the Carboniferous remind us that every era's legacy is woven from both land and water, and that the ocean's depths have always been a frontier for life's endless invention. While the Carboniferous period is often remembered for its lush forests and teeming seas, it was also an era marked by dramatic climate change, an invisible force that shaped the fate of life on Earth. The planet's atmosphere during this time was anything but stable. Fluctuations in global temperatures and shifting patterns of rainfall transformed the landscape, sometimes gradually, sometimes in abrupt, world-altering pulses. The root causes of these changes lay deep within the planet itself. The assembly of the supercontinent Panjia altered ocean currents and wind patterns, while periodic ice ages gripped the southern polar regions. Massive glaciers formed and retreated, causing sea levels to rise and fall by hundreds of meters. These glacial cycles created a patchwork of habitats, periodically isolating populations and driving evolutionary experimentation. Perhaps most striking was the Carboniferous' unique atmospheric composition. Oxygen levels soared to nearly 35%, much higher than today, fueling enormous insects and amphibians. Yet as vast forests locked away carbon in the form of peat and coal, atmospheric carbon dioxide plummeted. This led to a global cooling trend, contributing to the advance of ice sheets and the eventual collapse of the great rainforests. These climate shifts had profound effects on life. As habitats fragmented, some species vanished while others adapted, giving rise to new forms. Amphibians, once dominant, struggled as wetlands disappeared, making way for the first true reptiles, creatures better suited to the drier, fluctuating environments that followed. In the oceans, changing temperatures and sea levels sparked bursts of extinction and innovation, reshaping entire ecosystems. The story of the Carboniferous is a reminder that life and climate are inseparably linked. The evolution of plants altered the air itself, and in turn the shifting climate remade the world's living tapestry. The legacy of this ancient era is written not just in stone, but in the very air we breathe and the shape of life that followed. Beneath our feet lies a hidden archive, layers of rock that have preserved the secrets of the Carboniferous for over 300 million years. Across the globe, paleontologists have uncovered extraordinary fossil sites, each offering a window into this ancient world. One of the most remarkable discoveries is the Joggins fossil cliffs in Nova Scotia, Canada. Here, upright fossilized trees still stand in the position they grew, their hollow trunks sometimes containing the remains of early reptiles and amphibians. These cliffs have helped scientists piece together the complex web of life that once flourished in Carboniferous swamps. In Europe, the coal mines of England, Belgium and Germany have yielded exquisitely detailed imprints of giant dragonflies, millipedes and fern-like plants. These fossils reveal not just the size of ancient arthropods, but also the intricate patterns of their wings and leaves preserved in fine coal shale. Recent advances in technology are revealing even more. High-resolution CT scanning allows researchers to peer inside fossils without damaging them, unlocking details about ancient brains, muscles, and even skin textures. Isotopic analysis of fossilized plants and soils is shedding light on the changing atmosphere and climate during the Carboniferous, offering clues about how rapid shifts affected life on land and in the sea. Perhaps most exciting are new discoveries emerging from previously unexplored sites. In China, fossil beds have produced bizarre amphibians with armor-like skin and unexpected body shapes, hinting at untold evolutionary experiments. And in the United States, fossilized footprints, trackways, reveal the movements and behaviors of long-extinct creatures as they navigated swampy landscapes. Each new fossil find adds depth to our understanding of the Carboniferous. They are more than relics. They are records of survival and adaptation, extinction and innovation. As science advances, the ancient world beneath our feet becomes clearer, reminding us that the story of life is still being written, one discovery at a time.